It should have been a massacre. 40 Marines, moving like shadows, slipped behind a garrison of 30,000 Japanese soldiers on Saipan. The island's cane fields, ruins, and hidden caves were perfect for ambush. Every shadow could conceal a rifle. Every sound could trigger a grenade. For 72 hours, these men would turn the very geometry of the island against itself, using nothing more than silence, paper maps, and sheer discipline. They became the unseen architects of American firepower. By June 1944, Saipan had become the fulcrum of the Pacific War. Its airfields were more than runways. They were the key to Japan's home islands. B-29 Superfortresses, capable of carrying devastation thousands of miles, could take off directly from Saipan. But first, the island had to be wrested from Japanese control. Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito commanded roughly 30,000 soldiers and sailors, entrenched in caves, bunkers, and the ruins of Saipan's central ridge. Their weapons, Type 99 rifles, Type 92 and Type 96 machine guns, Type 89 grenade dischargers, and 37mm and 75mm artillery, were tuned to the terrain. His doctrine was brutal and clear. Hold as long as possible, bleed the invader, and buy time for the Empire. Inside Saito's headquarters, reports told a different story than the map suggested. American artillery, once considered clumsy and predictable, was precise, cutting directly into communication trenches and junctions. Company command posts went silent. Runners never returned. Saito's staff reasoned that the Americans were methodical, probing by day, adjusting fire with painful precision. What they did not yet realize was that small teams of Marines were already inside their geometry. They were observing, marking, and shaping the battlefield from within. Captain Tuchovsky of the 6th Marines assembled his team, 40 men selected for one purpose: to be ghosts in the dark. They carried rifles, pistols, knives, maps, and nothing more. Radios were limited. Communication would rely on hand signals, whispers, and pre-arranged codes. Every note, every mark, every observation would become a target for American artillery within hours. The mission was elegant in its simplicity. 4 elements would infiltrate after dark, mapping trenches, locating heavy weapons, marking targets, and surviving long enough to report back. No heroics, no firefights, only information. Dusk fell. Tropical heat eased. Shadows stretched across the cane fields. Marines moved in pairs, 200 meters apart, halting every 50 meters to check bearings and listen. Shell craters became cover. Collapsed buildings offered hidden routes. Every sound, every distant footstep could spell death. By 2300, they reached their first objective, a network of trenches flanking the main American advance route. Japanese positions were sophisticated, interlocking fields of fire, communication trenches leading to caves, sandbagged machine guns. They were designed to be lethal and predictable. Tuchovsky's team exploited that predictability with subtlety. Strips of cloth behind beams, faint chalk arrows behind rubble. Notes on angles and probable crew positions. Small signs invisible to the Japanese, yet readable by American forward observers. Information became firepower before a single shot was fired. By 0340, with the eastern horizon lightening, all 40 Marines returned to their lines. No casualties, no alerts, only precise intelligence ready to guide a day of artillery strikes that would reshape the battlefield. The genius of this operation was not in heroism, but in systems. American artillery was a machine. Forward observers, radio communication, fire direction centers, and hundreds of guns, all working in a precise rhythm. Tucholsky's team fed that machine with data from inside enemy lines, transforming guesswork into surgical strikes. Japanese defenders still fought with courage, but their system depended on intact command posts, functional communication lines, and predictable enemy behavior. The Marines broke that predictability. Command posts collapsed under artillery fire, trenches were shredded before reinforcements could respond, and cave mouths that once coordinated defense became graves. By the time Saipan fell, the impact of these small teams was clear. Speed, observation, and precision overcame numbers and terrain. The strategic outcome was brutal but undeniable. The island, its airfields, and the gateway to Japan were in American hands. Night 2 fell over Saipan, and the 40 Marines, already ghosts in the first night, prepared to slip even deeper into the Japanese rear. The outskirts of Garapan were a maze of ruined streets, collapsed buildings, and narrow alleys. To the Japanese defenders, it was perfect defensive ground. Snipers in shattered upper stories, machine guns in alleyways, observers in partially destroyed towers. But the Marines moved slower than ever, sometimes less than 300 meters per hour. They hugged shadows, ducked under doorframes, and stepped lightly over fallen beams. Every movement was measured. Every stop a chance to observe, record, and mark. Their target this night, a heavy machine gun position in a ruined building covering a key intersection. The Japanese Type 92 gun, mounted behind sandbags, awaited the next American armor push. From a collapsed rooftop, a thin strip of cloth was tied behind a broken beam, visible only to American forces approaching along pre-brief paths. Chalk arrows, barely visible at ankle height, indicated likely firing lanes. Every mark, every note, was a signal to American artillery. Here lies a threat that must die before our tanks move forward. Strategic insight. The Japanese defenders, adapting to American habits, had increased patrols, tightened tripwires, and shifted machine gun positions. Yet the Marines were already inside their operational rhythm, shaping the battlefield before the defenders could react. The small American teams were inside the enemy's decision loop, forcing the Japanese to respond to ghosts that did not fight in the conventional sense. By 02:10, a Japanese patrol brushed dangerously close. A small stone, thrown deliberately, diverted their attention, just long enough for the team to remain unseen. Two Type 99 rifle rounds cracked harmlessly above them, but the Marines became shadows again, invisible yet instrumental in shaping the day to come. By dawn, all elements had returned. No casualties, no compromise. 40 men had altered the battlefield without firing a single shot, setting the stage for American artillery to systematically dismantle Japanese positions. The next day, American artillery began its work. The positions marked during the previous nights vanished under precise barrages. A cave mouth that served as a command post was collapsed. A trench junction that allowed lateral movement of Japanese forces was obliterated. Unlike Japanese artillery, limited by fragile telephone lines, runners, and local coordination, American firepower could operate like a surgical tool. Forward observers transmitted coordinates, corrections, and target data to fire direction centers. These centers calculated trajectories, assigned batteries, and delivered shells with terrifying accuracy. Japanese positions while courageously defended, became isolated strongpoints, unable to coordinate, unable to adapt, and increasingly cut off from command. Each collapsed cave and destroyed command post slowed response time, minutes that would cost lives and territory. The third night was the ultimate test. Exhaustion gripped the Marines. Feet were blistered. Throats were raw from dust and cordite. Yet discipline and training carried them forward. Their mission now: confirm changes in Japanese positions. Had guns shifted? Had caves fallen silent? Had new obstacles appeared? Japanese officers began to realize the extent of the infiltration. Reports of small patrols became a pattern, a methodical unpicking of their entire defense network. The layered positions that had been their strength were no longer a system. They were isolated nodes, vulnerable to coordinated artillery strikes informed by human observation from the shadows. By the time Saipan fell in early July 1944, the cost was staggering. Roughly 3,400 Americans killed, more than 13,000 wounded. Japanese forces suffered around 29,000 killed, with only a few hundred prisoners taken. Civilian casualties compounded the tragedy, many forced into desperate acts under siege conditions. But strategically, the victory was decisive. Saipan, followed by Tinian and Guam, became unsinkable aircraft carriers for B-29 Superfortresses. For the first time, Japan's industrial heart was within reach of sustained American strategic bombing. And the contribution of the 40 Marines, the so-called 40 Thieves, was subtle yet profound. Maps they marked, caves they observed, trenches they measured. All these small actions compressed the battlefield decision cycle, allowing American firepower to strike with precision and efficiency. From these small patrols emerged a principle that would define American special operations for decades. Small teams operating ahead of the main force, observing, mapping, and preparing the battlefield, enabled overwhelming force to be applied with minimal risk. By the end of the Saipan campaign, the pattern was clear. Courage alone could not defeat an opponent whose strength was systemic. Its industrial machine, artillery networks, and disciplined coordination. The 40 Thieves had done what sheer numbers could not, bent the tempo of battle to American advantage. The tactical brilliance of the 40 Marines, moving unseen through cane fields and ruins, was more than a battlefield success. It was the birth of a modern operational concept: small, disciplined teams operating ahead of a larger force, using observation, stealth, and precise communication to shape the battlefield before the main assault. At sea level, a parallel experiment was already underway. After the disastrous Tarawa landings in November 1943, the US Navy recognized a need for specialized reconnaissance teams. Landing craft had been stranded on reefs hundreds of yards offshore, exposing troops to concentrated fire. The lesson was clear. Before mass movement, terrain must be understood, mapped, and prepared. By December 1943, underwater demolition teams, UDTs, began forming in Hawaii. Their mission: reconnoiter beaches and underwater obstacles, measure depths, sketch reefs, and if necessary, place explosives. The connection to Saipan's 40 Marines was immediate. In early 1944, UDTs supported operations across the Marshalls, then the Marianas, including Saipan and Tinian. They swam through surf zones under enemy fire, measuring coral heads and steel stakes, timing currents, and sketching reefs. By day briefed beachmasters and amphibious commanders, turning deadly terrain into manageable, actionable intelligence. Meanwhile, Taxski's Marines moved inland, mapping trenches, cave mouths, and enemy artillery positions. Both groups, one in water, one on land, shared the same principle. Observe first, shape the battlefield second. Allow overwhelming force to follow. By June and July 1944, the combination of these approaches compressed the enemy's decision loop. Positions that had seemed secure were now vulnerable to targeted fire. Defenders could no longer predict American movement. Every trench, every cave, every firing lane marked in secrecy became a node in a larger operational network. This philosophy would endure long after the Marianas. Post-war, UDTs continued to clear harbors, conduct reconnaissance, and refine stealth insertion techniques. Their operations evolved. Submarines, fast surface craft, heavier explosives, and later, cold water and nighttime missions. By 1962, the US Navy formalized this lineage with the creation of SEAL teams, Sea, Air, Land. On paper, they inherited the missions of UDTs. In practice, they inherited something less visible but far more profound: the mindset of Taxski's 40 Marines. Patience, observation, discipline, and a deep understanding of the enemy's system. The tools changed. Radios became lighter, night vision emerged. Carbines were suppressed, but the core tactical doctrine remained strikingly familiar. Move ahead of the main body, map and mark the enemy's defenses, then enable massed force to act precisely, efficiently, and decisively. Narration: strategic implications. On Saipan, the 40 Thieves' 3 nights of infiltration turned fear and silence into a day of devastating precision. American artillery and armor struck where the Japanese defenders least expected, unraveling layers of fortifications and collapsing command nodes. The result was not just a tactical victory, but a strategic enabler. With Saipan, Tinian, and Guam under American control, B-29 Superfortresses could reach Japan's industrial heart. The Pacific theater shifted. Air power became a direct threat. Logistics dictated tempo, and small, specialized teams became force multipliers. From the cane fields of Saipan to the surf zones of the Marianas, and eventually to rivers, coastlines, and urban centers worldwide, the lesson endured. Small, well-trained teams inside enemy systems could bend tempo, disrupt communications, and shape outcomes without overwhelming force. Courage and firepower alone could not match systemic strength. Understanding and exploiting the enemy's operational rhythm, the Japanese reliance on communication lines, predictable rotations, and layered defenses was far more lethal. Taxski's Marines had proven that information, precision, and patience could amplify force beyond numbers or firepower. By observing, mapping, marking, and surviving, the 40 Thieves had done more than assist in Saipan's capture. They had pioneered a methodology of modern special operations, one that continues to influence US military doctrine to this day. The 40 Marines were not heroes in the traditional sense. They were invisible operators, ghosts threading through enemy geometry, where a single misstep could mean death. Their environment was merciless. Collapsed buildings, cane fields slick with dew, and a labyrinth of caves and trenches designed to channel, trap, and kill. Every shadow could conceal a Japanese rifle. Every sound might trigger a grenade. From dusk to dawn, the Marines moved in silent intervals, pairs spaced 200 meters apart, stopping every 50 meters to orient themselves by compass, check maps, and scan the terrain. Their weapons were basic but precise. M1903 A4 rifles for scouts, M1 Garrons for support, pistols and knives for emergencies. Communication relied entirely on hand signals and whispered call signs. A system as fragile as it was effective. Narration, exploiting predictability. The Japanese had assumed American movements would be conventional, slow, daytime pushes followed by nighttime consolidation. Tatsuki's patrol disrupted that expectation. Every map drawn, every faint strip of cloth tied in rubble, every chalk arrow on a wall altered the battlefield in real time. By 2300 hours on the first night, the Marines reached their first trench objective. They observed a 75mm gun, its field of fire a deadly overlap with another position, creating a textbook kill zone. No shots were fired. No alarm raised. Instead, every detail was recorded, every arc of fire mapped for artillery to neutralize before American tanks ever approached. Every step carried risk. At 0210, a Japanese patrol brushed dangerously close to one of the rooftop teams. A stone tossed, a frozen breath, a heartbeat, and the patrol passed unaware. The Marines froze in place, shadows among shadows, practicing a discipline honed for life and death. Their survival was not luck, it was training, patience, and a system in motion. The second night took the patrol into Garrapan, where shattered streets and half-collapsed buildings gave defenders countless hiding places. The Marines adjusted, moving slower than before, hugging walls, using interior routes, avoiding silhouetting themselves against the skyline. They found a heavy machine gun in a ruined building, its firing lane covering a key intersection. Again, there was no engagement, just observation, marking, and reporting. Every subtle signal became an instruction to American artillery, a silent hammer striking the Japanese positions long before the main assault arrived. By the third night, exhaustion became a constant companion. Blistered feet, raw throats from dust and cordite, hunger and thirst. Still, every Marine followed the rhythm. Check compass, check interval, stop, listen, move. Small mistakes could be fatal, yet the system of careful pacing, observation, and communication carried them forward. On the Japanese side, the effects were cumulative. Command posts vanished under concentrated fire. Communication lines were severed. Supply routes disrupted. Officers scrambled to respond, only to find routes blocked or positions neutralized. The layered defense that once promised control began to unravel. By sunrise, the 40 Marines returned safely to their lines. Their immediate reward was not medals or fanfare, but maps, sketches, and coordinates. The artillery now had precise instructions, turning what would have been broad, wasteful bombardments into surgical strikes on enemy positions. This small team had done more than survive. They had redefined the operational tempo of an entire campaign. By transforming intelligence into action, they allowed American artillery and armor to operate with unprecedented precision. Positions that seemed impregnable fell. Communications that had guided the Japanese defense were shattered. The capture of Saipan came at enormous cost. Roughly 3,400 Americans killed, 13,000 wounded, around 29,000 Japanese dead, with few taken prisoner. Civilians suffered, often forced into desperate acts, yet the strategic outcome was clear. The Marianas became unsinkable aircraft carriers, enabling the B-29 bombing campaign against Japan's home islands. The work of Tatsuki and his men would echo for decades. From Saipan to the later UDTs, and eventually to SEAL teams, the lesson remained the same. Small, highly trained teams operating ahead of the main force could bend the battlefield to their will. Precision, patience, and understanding the enemy system were more lethal than numbers alone. The 72 hours of infiltration were not just a daring patrol. They were a prototype for modern special operations, demonstrating that disciplined observation, stealth, and connectivity could shape outcomes far beyond what sheer force could achieve. The story of Saipan is more than just maps, trenches, and numbers. It is the tale of courage, discipline, and ingenuity, the quiet work of small teams that turned silence into strategy and shadows into decisive action. From the 40 Marines moving unseen through cane fields to the evolution of modern special forces, Saipan reminds us that in war, as in life, precision, patience, and understanding your environment can change the course of history. Dive deeper into the untold stories of World War II. Subscribe now and join us as we uncover the hidden strategies, extraordinary bravery, and pivotal moments that shaped the world. Every story has a lesson. Don't miss the next chapter.